We will deliver them unto the knife. We will burn them from this world until there is nothing left but ash. And the Legion. In the unforgiving heat of the Arizona wastes, something ancient was reborn. Not the ideals of the old world, nor the broken promises of democracy, no. From the ashes of civilization, a new world order emerged. Ruthless, relentless, and Roman. Caesar's Legion. Created by a man once called Edward Sallow, the Legion is unlike anything else in the post-nuclear world. Drawing inspiration from the ancient Roman Empire and forged through conquest, the Legion operates on one principle above all: strength through domination. In Fallout New Vegas, the Legion stands as one of the Mojave's superpowers, a rising tide of blood and discipline, challenging the new California Republic not only for Hoover Dam, but for the future of the West Coast itself. Their methods are brutal. Slavery, crucifixion, and absolute obedience are not exceptions, they are doctrine. But for all its cruelty, the Legion brings something most factions failed to achieve: total unity. No infighting, no bureaucracy. Just one voice, one law, one Kaiser. But behind the iron discipline and imperial grandeur lies a deeper question, one that haunts every empire, every tyrant, every revolution. Can order born through brutality ever endure, or is Caesar's vision doomed to crumble like the empire that inspired it? This is the story of Caesar's Legion. To understand the Legion, you must first understand the man who created it. Before he was Caesar, he was Edward Sallow, a child of the new California Republic, raised not in a military barracks or tribal camp, but among books, doctors, and humanitarians. Born in 2226, Sallow was taken in by the Followers of the Apocalypse, a humanitarian organization dedicated to spreading education and rebuilding society in the wake of nuclear devastation. By all accounts, he was brilliant, becoming a skilled linguist and anthropologist. However, Sallow never took to the philosophy of the Followers, believing them to be fools educating the weak, and knew in his mind that this was no way to unify the wasteland. Sallow during this time proved himself to be a narcissist, and many of his fellow followers did not like him and actively sought to push him away. In 2246, at just 20 years old, Sallow was sent east on an anthropological expedition to the region near the Grand Canyon, tasked with studying tribal languages and cultures. He was joined by fellow followers Calhoun and a Mormon missionary, Joshua Graham, a skilled interpreter and survivalist from New Canaan. It was during this time, deep in the wasteland and cut off from the NCR, that Sallow found and began to read the text of antiquity, not as a scholar, but as a visionary. What began as historical curiosity became something more. To Sallow, the Roman Empire wasn't just an ancient civilization. It was a blueprint, a tool, a way to bring order to chaos. Their mission was meant to be peaceful, but the wasteland had other plans. Captured by the Blackfoot tribe, Sallow's group faced execution. The Blackfoots were in a state of constant war with the surrounding tribes, disorganized, under-equipped, and desperate. Sallow made a decision that would define the rest of his life. They were doomed, untrained, undisciplined, but they were numerous, and they had potential. Drawing upon his recently gained knowledge, Sallow offered the Blackfoots more than survival. He offered them victory. He reorganized their warriors into centuries and cohorts, taught them military discipline, and introduced them to strategic doctrines of ancient Rome. The transformation was complete. Edward Sallow was dead, and Caesar was born. With the Blackfoots as his first legionaries and Graham as his first legate, Caesar launched a brutal campaign of conquest across the Grand Canyon region. He trained, armed, and disciplined them with an iron hand. The results were undeniable. Tribe after tribe fell under his banner, some through battle, others through fear. But Caesar's vision of Rome was not one of aqueducts and marble forums. It was one of purging, crucifixion, and absolute authority. Until now, every tribe I've conquered has been so backwards and stunted, enslavement has been a gift bestowed upon them. Those who surrendered were enslaved, men forced into labor or military service, women into breeding roles, and children indoctrinated into the Legion's ideology. Those who resisted were made examples of. Entire tribes were wiped from history, their names forbidden to be spoken, their cultures burned to ash. Crucifixions became common, language was stripped away, individual identity was erased. This was not unity through peace. It was unity through annihilation. And through it all, Caesar believed he was bringing salvation, that the strong had a duty to dominate the weak, and that the chaos of the wasteland could only be tamed through fire, fear, and obedience. By 2050, the Legion was no longer a small warband. It was an empire in motion. One tribe had become dozens, dozens became hundreds, and all of them, every warrior, every slave, every whisper of resistance moved according to Caesar's will. This was not a republic, not a democracy. It was a machine of conquest, powered by pain, held together by loyalty, and bound to the vision of a single man. The followers had sent a scholar into the wasteland. What they got back was a dictator in Legion Red, a man who believed that through blood and domination, he could save mankind from itself. In Rome, I found a template for society equal to the challenges of the post-apocalyptic world. A society that could and would survive. A society that would prevent mankind from fracturing and destroying itself in this new world by establishing a new Pax Romana. The Legion is more than an army. It is a philosophy, a religion, and a social order, all imposed by one man, Caesar. He believes that humanity left to its own devices will collapse into disorder, that the chaos of tribal life, the bureaucratic rot of the NCR, and the moral revelism of the old world are symptoms of decay. To survive, humanity must be forged anew, purified through fire, discipline, and conquest. To Caesar, individuality is poison. It breeds dissent, weakness, and selfishness. In the Legion, there is no self, only obedience to the whole. Every legionary is stripped of their past, their name, their culture. They become tools, wielded by Caesar's will. Slavery is not a byproduct. It is central to Legion doctrine. Those conquered by the Legion are enslaved not merely to serve, but to be re-educated. A slave's identity is erased, their function defined solely by the needs of the Legion. Rebellion is punished with torture or crucifixion, a fate as symbolic as it is terrifying. Women fare much worse in the Legion. In Caesar's ideal society, gender roles are fixed and brutal. Women are not permitted to serve in the military. They are regulated to breeding, servitude, or sexual slavery. To the Legion, this is not cruelty, it is natural law. The Legion's structure reflects Caesar's belief in rigid hierarchy and absolute loyalty. At the top sits Caesar himself, not as a general, but as a god king, the living embodiment of Mars, the Roman god of war. His word is law, his decisions are unquestioned. Beneath Caesar is the legate, the Legion's highest-ranking military commander. The most infamous of these is Legate Lanius, a brutal warlord known as the Monster of the East, feared even by his own men. Where Caesar brings ideology, Lanius brings pure, unrelenting violence. Below the legate are the Centurions, veteran commanders who lead cohorts into battle and oversee discipline among the ranks. They are ruthless, ambitious, and often sadistic, many of them rising through the ranks by sheer brutality. Then come the Decani, junior officers who lead squads, and the Legionaries, the rank-and-file soldiers. Legionaries are trained from a young age to fight, kill, and obey. Any sign of hesitation is punished. Cowardice is death. The Legion does not tolerate failure. A soldier who retreats is beaten to death by his brothers. A commander who loses is crucified for public shame. Loyalty is enforced through fear, and strength is the only virtue. The Legion doesn't just conquer with swords and fire. It conquers with psychological warfare. They crucify NCR soldiers and deserters along roads to send a message. They enslave and butcher entire tribes, removing any traces of their culture. They rename the land, silence dissent, and extinguish memory. What can't be controlled is destroyed. But survival in the Legion is a hollow thing. It means surrendering everything. Your past, your freedom, your name, your humanity. And yet to Caesar, it is all worth it. Because in his eyes, the old world failed not because it was too brutal, but because it wasn't brutal enough. Caesar's legion was born in blood, and it grew the same way. From the moment the Blackfoots were reforged into the first legionaries, Caesar began a relentless campaign across the Arizona wastes, sweeping through the land like wildfire. His war was not just for territory, it was ideological, a crusade to purge chaos, tribalism, and weakness from the face of the earth. Dozens of tribes, some ancient, others barely out of anarchy, stood in his path. None survived. Tribe after tribe fell under the banner of the Bowl. Some were offered a choice, submit or be annihilated. Those who bent the knee were stripped of their culture and forced into the legion's service. Their men became legionaries or slaves, their women became breeders, and their children were indoctrinated into the legion's cult-like hierarchy. Others resisted and were wiped from the map. Each conquest was not just a victory, it was a message. The Legion's early base of operations was the Grand Canyon, a natural fortress from which Caesar launched his campaigns. There, in the cliffs and shadows, the first war councils were held. There, the identity of the Legion was forged. But Caesar's ambition needed more than camps and tents. He needed a capital, a symbol of permanence. That symbol became Flagstaff. After conquering the region, Caesar ordered the city repurposed into the de facto capital of the Legion. Though the infrastructure was primitive compared to NCR standards, Flagstaff served as a central hub for logistics, war planning, and political control over the eastern wastes. From there, the Legion expanded further west, crossing the Colorado River, bringing death to every tribe and settlement in its path. Though the Legion enforces a brutal ideological purity within, Caesar is not blind to practicality. Trade is permitted, but only on Caesar's terms. Certain external traders, often from the NCR, the Mojave, or distant tribal territories, are allowed limited access to Legion lands. These merchants operate under strict surveillance, guided by Legion escorts, and forbidden from speaking to slaves, women, or soldiers unless explicitly authorized. The goods most often traded included weapons, medical supplies, ammunition, and food, essentials that the Legion cannot always seize through conquest alone. In return, the Legion may offer loot, purified water, or materials gathered from defeated tribes. But these merchants walk a thin line. Traders who insult Legion doctrine or are caught spreading NCR propaganda risk being beaten, enslaved, or crucified as spies. This limited openness is not an embrace of commerce, it is a calculated extension of Caesar's will. Many of those coming back from Legion territory wore the horror of what they seen well into the next few saloons they would visit, but the profitability of trade with a civilization that could not produce much above a tribal level of tech was simply too great to ignore. By 2277, Caesar's gaze had turned to the jewel of the Mojave, Hoover Dam. To Caesar, the dam was more than a strategic asset. It was a symbol of the old world's technological might, a relic of imperial ambition. Whoever held the dam held the fate of the Mojave, and Caesar intended to take it, not just for power, but to prove that the Legion was the rightful heir to the earth. But standing in his way was the new California Republic. The NCR, with its bureaucracy, rifles, and army of volunteers represented everything Caesar despised: corruption, weakness, and a failure to bring true order. The dam became the staging ground for the first major clash between two empires, Legion versus Republic. The Legion's army, hardened by years of brutal tribal warfare, surged across the Colorado under Caesar's command. At first, they overwhelmed outposts and patrols, pushing the NCR back, but when the two forces met at Hoover Dam, the Legion encountered something it rarely faced: a military equal. Despite the Legion's discipline and ferocity, the NCR Rangers, 1st Recon sharpshooters, and regular army units mounted a fierce defense. The battle was long, chaotic, and devastating. In the end, the Legion was repelled, suffering heavy losses. Though Caesar claimed it was a tactical retreat, it marked the first true defeat for the Legion and the fracture in the image of their unstoppable momentum. Caesar did not believe in failure, and so in accordance with Legion law, Legate Graham was condemned. I sent Graham into the Grand Canyon, dressed in tar, set on fire. Let him burn, let him fall. He was covered in pitch, set aflame, and thrown alive into the Grand Canyon. But Graham did not die. Somehow, by miracle or willpower or sheer hatred, he survived. His body was burned beyond recognition, his face scarred and his past consumed by fire. Fleeing from Caesar's wrath and rejected by the Legion, Graham wandered until he was found and taken in by the Dead Horses, a tribe in Zion Canyon. There, he began to seek atonement for his crimes. He became known as the Burn Man, a mythic figure believed by many to be a ghost, a cursed soul destined to suffer forever. In truth, he became a spiritual leader to the Dead Horses and fought alongside the New Canaanites, trying to redeem himself for the atrocities he committed in Caesar's name. By the time of Fallout New Vegas and the Honest Hearts DLC, Joshua Graham is a changed man, but not a pacifist. While he has turned away from Caesar's teachings, the rage still burns within him. And when the White Legs, a Legion-aligned tribe, threaten his people, Graham returns to war, this time to protect, not to conquer. Still, Caesar would not abandon his campaign. In the years that followed, the Legion solidified its grip on Eastern territory while continuing to raid, terrorize, and execute along the border. Every day brought new crucifixions, new slaves, and renewed preparations for a second, final assault on the Mojave. Because to Caesar, the Dam is not just a target, it is destiny. Caesar built an empire meant to last 1,000 years, but like so many self-proclaimed gods, he built it around himself. Though he preached the strength of the collective, the discipline of the Legion, and the inevitability of conquest, everything depended on one man, his words, his vision, his will, and in the year 2281, that man was dying. By the time the Legion reached the Mojave, Caesar was suffering from a malignant brain tumor. The symptoms were growing worse, blinding headaches, mood swings, and lapses in judgment. Despite commanding one of the largest military forces in the post-apocalyptic world, Caesar refused to name a successor. He believed that no one else, not even Legate Lanius, could carry his vision in the same clarity or purpose. By withholding succession, Caesar ensured total loyalty during his life, but he also sowed the seeds of future chaos. When the God King dies and no one stands ready to replace him, what becomes of the Empire? The Legion, for all its discipline and order, is fragile at the top. It is a cult, built not on law or tradition, but on Caesar himself, and like all cults of personality, it carries within it the blueprint for its own collapse. The story of Caesar's Legion doesn't end with the death of a tyrant or the fall of an empire. Its influence echoes, in ash, in memory, and in fear. And even if the Legion collapses after Caesar's death, its mark on the Mojave wasteland is indelible. Entire cultures were erased, tribes that had survived for generations were enslaved, assimilated, or exterminated. The Legion redrew the map of the Southwest, not just physically, but ideologically. For years, it forced the NCR to harden its military posture, to tighten control over the territory, to reconsider its own decadence. In the Mojave, slaves still remember the banners, even if they've been torn down. Survivors still whisper about the bull, about what it did to their people. Even if the Legion is defeated at Hoover Dam, its impact remains, not just in scars, but in choices. Because Caesar offered the wasteland something few others ever did: order, absolute, unwavering, brutal order. And that is the heart of the question the Legion forces us to confront. Was it worth the cost? Would you trade your freedom, your identity, and your humanity for safety? For a world without chaos? For a world where the strong do not just survive, but rule? The Legion's atrocities are impossible to ignore, but so is the truth that made it thrive. In a world ravaged by nuclear fire and lawlessness, some people welcomed the chains. From Edward Sallow's transformation into Caesar, to the Legion's brutal conquest across Arizona, to its rigid, dehumanizing ideology, and its inevitable unraveling at the feet of one man's ego and morality. The Legion rose through strength and fire, but was always one breath away from collapse. So now we ask the question: was there any truth in Caesar's vision? Did the Legion offer an alternative to the wasteland, or was it always doomed to rot from within? Let me know what you think. Was the Legion's order ever worth its cost, or was it just another empire built on sand and skulls? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, war never changes.